everyone. A big warm welcome to YouCan 2.0, the Youth and Climate Action Nexus. It is an absolute pleasure to have you all here today as we come together to discuss, debate, and deep dive in the most critical issues of our time climate change. Before we begin, let me tell you about some exciting things that are happening alongside our discussions today. Right at 12 a.m., our art exhibition hall will be open. Like it is open right now for viewing where the creativity meets sustainability. These pieces capture the urgency, challenges, and hope surrounding climate action. And that's not all. Throughout the day, you can explore the green businesses stalls that are where sustainable enterprises are showcasing their innovative solutions for the greener future. Don't miss out. Now, officially, to kick things off, we have the privilege of hearing from someone whose work has shaped the fields of defense, energy security, and climate resilience. He's been instrumental in advancing India's indigenous laser technology and was a member of a National Security Council. He has received a Padma Shri Award in 2002 for his prestigious contributions in this field. He is our India's very own 007 agent. Beyond his remarkable scientific achievements, he has been a relentless advocate for sustainability and climate resilience. As a founding trustee of Pune International Center, he has led numerous initiatives that shape policy, inspire action, and promote sustainable development. Ladies and gentlemen, please welcome Professor Amitav Malik on the stage to deliver the inaugural address.
Friends, we are conducting this conference on climate emergency because PIC started this activity in 2011 and I started this activity for public awareness, awakening public awareness about climate change. But even going back, I think we all know that the first meeting of the Conference of Parties, COP they are called, was held in Brazil, Rio in 1991. I'm mentioning this because you are now college students. Some of you may not be aware what happened 30 years ago. But by 1991, we had ample evidence that climate was changing very fast, unnaturally. And we had evidence that something has to be done very aggressively and very urgently to stop the global warming increasing, because that process is very difficult to reverse. Starting from there, we, as a PIC division of EECC, EECC is Environment, Energy, Environment and Climate Change. We have done many things. Finally, I have come to the stage of calling a conference on climate emergency. Mind you, to my best of my knowledge, nobody has yet held a conference or a deliberation on the subject calling it that this is a climate emergency. So hope it will carry forward and it will carry a totally different message for the people to take it very, very seriously. So past 60, 70 years, people think about the start of the industrial era. That was on 250 years ago. But actually what has happened is the rate of change in carbon dioxide accumulation in atmosphere, greenhouse gases, GHG accumulation in atmosphere has accelerated exponentially since the last 60, 70 years. And today we are at a place, at a stage where the main component or main culprit of greenhouse gases is the carbon dioxide, CO2. Today, the CO2 concentration in the atmosphere has reached 425 parts per million, which was less than 200 during the pre-industrial era. So we have actually rapidly developed this kind of a backup. It's accumulated. CO2 incidentally is colorless, odorless, not visible, and it collects in atmosphere for hundreds of years once it is released. And that is why we are at a stage where we have very high concentration of CO2. We can't see it, of course, but then the longevity of that CO2 in the atmosphere is going to be yet another hundreds of years. So that is the emergency situation that we are talking about. But it's not just CO2. It is also, in the last 50, 60 years, we have seen rapid degradation of ecosystem, environment. And that has further aggravated the livability of the human species, in fact, of all living organisms. Many species have already gone extinct. Yeah. And if we don't change things, we are at a stage where human survival also will be at a stake. So I'm using my notes, and I have no hesitation in sharing this with anybody who wants to. There are about 10 slides here. And those who want to have a copy of this slide, please provide your name, affiliation, and email ID. We will send it to you. So right now, please listen to me and absorb. I think that is the best way to communicate. So unchecked fossil fuel consumption has caused risking environmental tipping points. Tipping points is points where things go beyond human intervention. For instance, we have a Arctic, Greenland sea ice melting. It is melting so fast in the last few decades that now people are looking at free waterways for shipping lanes, which is good for business, not good for the polar bears, not good for the environment as such. So it is not a one-way kind of a situation where we can either say something is good or something bad. It has got a multiplicity of characteristics and multiple impact scenario. I just gave you one incident which is already happening. In fact, melting of Greenland ice sheets and melting of the Antarctic ice sheets, which are both going on, both are kind of tipping points. Once it is crossed beyond a line, we can do nothing about it, because the more ice melts, and the more radiation is absorbed, because the ice, which is used to reflect radiation, heat, is not there anymore. So it's a feedback process which is getting worse and worse. So IPCC, International Panel of Climate Change, have identified 9 or 11 or 16 so-called tipping points. We already crossed 5 or 6 of them. We means humanity. And climate change, global warming, which we are seeing the manifestation in actually our own in Pune, things are getting warmer than usual. Things are getting unexpectedly rainy season, unexpectedly dry season, unexpectedly cold wave. So all these are the characteristics of the upper air of the tropospheric changes of the earth, which is being missed not by anybody, but it is changing by itself because of the interconnected relationship between everything else. Where we are today? We are today at a point where it looks like unless we do some drastic steps, drastic action, going further into climate crisis, global warming crisis. In fact, the word warming has now become out of fashion. People are now talking about global heating problem. We are already 1.5 degrees, so-called, the threshold that was discussed in Paris Agreement. We already crossed that in last year, 2024. Which means what? The earth has been very stable at a temperature of 15 degrees centigrade, which is very cold. But that is how humanity has evolved, and we have done all the progress because that is the ideal condition for humankind and other life forms. We are losing that advantage of having a friendly environment. And therefore, so we have lost touch with the reality almost. Like we are not able to see that this is going to be inevitable. And that is the reason why nobody is taking it seriously, except climate scientists, except activists like me on the other side of the ATH. And I see that my grandson who is 16, my granddaughter who is 14, have no future. And this is what is happening. Another way of looking at it, that we have something called Earth Overshoot Day. Ideally, that Overshoot Day should happen in December. That means that day we should have used our quota of Earth resources for our progress, for our livelihood. That Earth Overshoot Day had come down to June. Fortunately, because of the COVID, there is some recovery because there was less of activity during COVID. And today it is around 1st August or maybe end of July. What does it mean? It means for the next 5 months, September, October, November, December, December, we are borrowing from the future. Whose future? Our children, our grandchildren. What are we doing? This is something which is happening in reality. There is proof of it. There are papers on it. There are reports on it. There are COP committee meetings. There are so many conferences. कोणी काही करत नाही. कोणी करायला पाहिजे? Begin with, it is society which should do it. But then we say, no, government will do it. Who is government? We elect the government. We elect the political leaders who finally take decisions. So it's high time that we know and we realize that it is up to us, the people. We have to create a groundswell of awareness and action. Only then things will start happening. Mind you, IPCC, International Panel on Climate Change, had declared in 2018 that the decade of 2020 to 2030, 10 years, will be extremely critical on deciding what the planet will be in 2100 and 2200, hundreds of years later on. It was this kind of scenario that was painted by the IPCC, and we took it seriously. And in PIC, we said, okay, we can't change the world, but we can try to change our environment, our own city. So we started doing work on making PMR, Pune Metropolitan Region, net carbon neutral by 2030. And that project is doing well. Hopefully, it will make a difference. But then, can we wait till 2030? No. Because by 2030, some of the tipping points will have already crossed. So it is for this year, youth of India, the youth of the world, and which is happening. Everybody who is aware of it is acutely aware that what is happening. Elderly people are not listening. It will not affect them. They will go. Politicians, businessmen, they are not listening because their whole focus is on money. Next quarter profit. It's not because of them, it's because of the public. The public wants next quarter profit. And those are the companies that are doing well. So we can't blame the companies or we can't blame the government. We have to understand that we have to be much wiser. I'm talking to younger group of people, and that's why it is all the more important to understand that ultimately it is this younger group of people. Today, if a child is born in 2025, he will be 70 or 75 by the end of this century. Good Lord. He will not have time or margin to think about luxuries of life or challenges of life. He will be faced with only survival problem. So we are doing this to our own children, our own grandchildren. The other day, I gave a talk in Southern Command to elderly people on, of course, their focus was national security. But it's good to know that we today think national security is something very important, very supreme for a nation. Right? That national security is being compromised by the climate change, by the global heating. Our productivity will go down when the wet bulb temperature rises by 5 degrees. We will have GDP losses, although I believe GDP is not the right measure. But it will be financial losses. So actually you can understand the reason why I'm not projecting, because what I'm saying is not exactly what is in front of me. So I was actually talking about why no climate action yet. And some of my colleagues will deliberate on this subject later on. But simple answer to why no climate action yet. When the red bulbs are already visible, they are actually flashing. Why? Because we are not able to understand that it is not tomorrow, it's not day after tomorrow that we can take an action. It is today. If we take action today, maybe the government will notice that in a day or two. Maybe the policymakers will be forced to think about doing something positive in a few weeks. Maybe so some things start happening, and when something starts happening, then it's a different flow. For instance, we have renewable energy, which is not polluting energy, and the renewable energy growth is now driven by not people, it's driven by profit. So we have to see, telling people that you reduce your consumption and you don't do anything and you have a lower grade of life, that will not work. We have to find win-win solutions. Win-win solutions which will take care of the climate while also taking care of the economy and development. There is a huge groundswell of sustainability, sustainable development. Why? Industries are coming to us like think tanks, trying to understand how their business can be made more sustainable in a jiffy, in matter of 3 years or 5 years. What is their interest? They are beginning to understand that this business as usual, as we call it, will not be sustainable, will not work. So it is against that backdrop that we are holding this conference. I'm not blaming any government, including our own. Whatever is possible, they are doing. Now, our renewable energy capacity increase is quite impressive. We may actually cross 500 gigawatt capacity by 2030. But that is nothing compared to what needs to be done to make a difference. To put it in perspective, we, humanity, are belching out 48 megatons of greenhouse gases in the atmosphere every year. If you include all the GHG, it will 51, not megatons, kilotons, sorry. On all that, most of it that accumulates. So people are now talking, particularly in Western countries, or negative emission technology, carbon removal from atmosphere. Yes, experiments are happening, something is possible. But will it be possible at the scale that is required? Unlikely. It will be good as the technology growth. It will be good as a step in the right direction. But unless it can be at the scale that is required, humanity is left in the same lurch. My intention of putting it in these kind of terms is to share with you all that we are really in a climate emergency. Ante disat nahi. Sorry, I'm a Bengali, but I very often switch to Marathi. So I switch to Marathi saying, ते दिसत नाही, कळत नाही. म्हणून आपल्याला वाटतं की कोणीतरी करेल, नंतर करेल. And therefore we don't do exactly what we must do today, yesterday. That is the situation that we are. Person like me, on the happier side of 80, I'll go. I'll not suffer. But what about you people? What about your children? What about your career? What about your future? We are compromising everything for something which is controllable because it is man-created. It's not the volcano that created all this. If it is man-created, it can be man-corrected. And yet we are not doing it. This is an introductory talk to give you the perspective. I think my colleagues are far more prepared to talk to you in details. My senior colleagues like Dr. Gurudas and Nitant Mate are here. They will be talking to you at different kind of levels. Detailed, subject-based, sector-based, and so on and so forth. But overall, what I am trying to convey that Pune International Center and the ECC, Energy, Environment and Climate Change Division of PECC, which I have been heading for last 14 years, has got into this kind of a challenge of calling the situation as climate emergency. And that's what I'm trying to explain, that it is indeed an emergency already. I don't know many things I can say. There is always a feeling that this is a global phenomenon, therefore it will be solved by global activity. Unfortunately, fortunately, it's a man-made phenomenon, and all the solutions are local. They start by being local. They start at the local level and then they combine together to become national, regional, global. That is how it is happening. That's how it must happen. Few things that are happening that way. But this is global warming due to excessive burning of fossil fuel is indeed a huge challenge. But that's not all. There is a second part of it, second side of it. And that is the ecological disaster. Ecological exploitation by human beings, again, for monetary gains, for next quarter profit. And I think we are all aware of that. So it's a double-edged problem, and therefore it will need a double-edged solution. Once again, at local level first, merging with national level and global level. It's that kind of situation that we are talking about where solutions are feasible, they are doable, possible. And yet, They are possible only if it is taken up in locally. Unless it is taken up locally, it will not combine together. So ecological restoration is a major challenge, even bigger than the CO2 accumulation because of the fossil fuel burning. Because we already have technological alternative solutions for not using fossil fuel but using renewable energy. But for restoring biodiversity, restoring natural assets, good Lord, we are going backward and backward. So we need to, of course, there are lots of ecological societies, they are trying their best. Everything is happening. It's not that people are not doing anything, but it is too late, too little, in a way. So therefore, everything has to pick up no momentum. Only then we will actually talk about managing humanity not crossing too many tipping points of the environment. Because as we cross tipping points, the environment, global environment, Earth environment, will become untenable, unlivable. So large parts of the Earth, for India, let us say, it will be very hot in the hot places like Rajasthan, and it will be very tricky for coastal areas where the sea rise will pick up momentum. It is estimated by 2030, sea level will go to 1 meter per decade. It's quite huge. 1 meter per decade means every year, you are going up by almost 10 centimeters. You know that 10 centimeter rise in sea level can create havoc in the coastal area. Today, most of our business, most of our activities, very profitable activities, economic activities, are all in the coastal area. We have a long coast. We are vulnerable. Similarly, most of the glaciers are melting, and we have a huge glacial of Himalaya. If the glaciers melt, then most of our rivers are ice melt waters. So they will either go hugely flooding or become dry, depending on the season, depending on what you're looking at. And there will be calamities when there are climate extremes. The climate extremes today already are having a multi-million dollar loss figures world over. We can calculate what it will be for India in the next 7 years or 6 years. And all that money can be saved. All that money can be invested in what is to be done. We are at that kind of a peculiar situation where we can do a whole lot. We can actually reverse so-called climate change bit by bit, so that by 2050, when people are talking about net carbon zero means nothing actually. Even if it is achieved, all that it will achieve, there will be no new carbon deposits added after 2050. But all that is already there. After 2050 will be there. If the carbon concentration today is 425 ppm, probably it will be 440 or 450 by. So all that will be there. Their effect will be there. It will not go away. There are no technologies yet proven that can really work at that scale. Yes, something will happen, some things will start happening. But today, can we wait for unknown variables? While the known is staring in the face. That is a situation that is called emergency. That's why I'm saying the reason why IPCC is holding this climate emergency conference today is a dialogue with youth in the YouCan. UCAN is Climate Active Network, Climate Action Network. So under this aegis of the YouCan, we are hoping to reach out to the youth. Much larger number will happen. We tried it out in the 1.5 years ago. We had a more than 1,000 footfall, and I'm sure maybe this year we'll exceed that. Which means what? Those people who are participating in this kind of a discussion, this kind of exposure, should become ambassadors for future change. They should take up initiative to influence others to move in the right direction. So it is with this wish that I am speaking to you, requesting you to understand the gravity of situation. The situation not out of control. It is still can be within our control, provided we recognize the dangers and we do what is necessary, both in terms of fossil fuel burning, also in terms of ecological restoration. There will be many talks on this. Tomorrow is our main conference in PIC campus on all the gamut of it, ending up with the impact of climate change or climate extremes on economy. So our economic model, which today only measures GDP. Unfortunately, GDP measures what? GDP measures the amount of money transfer between countries. And when our GDP goes up, we say, wow, we are there. You are nowhere. Because actually GDP is not measuring health of the planet, health of the mankind, or real wealth of the humankind. So we are also proposing that GDP should be replaced with what we can call green GDP, which will factor in the amount of earth resources that are used for creating that so-called GDP number. We are also proposing in the final two-day event that, see, everybody cannot be responsible by the same amount. Obviously, historically, Western countries, advanced countries have emitted much more. And we had a long discussion for some time on differentiated responsibility. But all that is now gone because now we are here face to face with the danger. But today we can do things. Today, once again, we are looking at escape routes called either net carbon neutrality or carbon trading. Yes, of course, they will help to begin with, but they are not the final answers. The real answer is restoring ecosystem, restoring carbon balance. As long as some of us understand that real solution is much more difficult and we need to work together for it, then I think the purpose is largely served. Talk, I've got. Just let me go. So I will probably end here and let my young colleagues take over and they can do a much better job. But my request is please take this seriously. Climate emergency is not a subject to be taken lightly. It is really happening. Namaskar.
None. Thank you, sir, so much for your insightful opening remarks.